for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football. Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Over 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 19th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 25 years of excellence, Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Show with your hosts, Andy Hall and Brian Eikenberry.
Welcome, friends, to week number 2. How happy are some of us to have placed week 1 in the rear view? Face forward, proud warrior. No matter what has already transpired, the sun did indeed rise on Tuesday morning, and here we are, all of us, still in playoff contention in our respective fantasy leagues. Andy Hall, joined as I always am by Brian Eikenberry. Yay or nay week 1 for you, Brian, or a little bit of both?
I was 2 for 3, so it was a good, 3 for 4 if you count the national one. So I was happy. I avoided the injury bug. I had no real letdowns except for in our listener league, which I lost by a tenth of a point or something.
Fractions, man.
But whatever. I mean, both of those games were pretty terrible. So I'm good.
Well, I'm glad you're good, because I'm not. I'm pretty terrible. I lost in all but one of my leagues and lost David Johnson in a couple of them.
Whoops.
Yeah. And for as many places as I own Kareem Hunt, you'd think I would have started him in every league in week 1. Actually, I didn't, because I thought I had better options. That turned out to be a big mistake. A mistake I probably won't make again. And that's what week 1's all about. That and do not overreact. As we always talk about, Brian, after week 1, do not overreact to what you saw in week 1. Yes, I guess if you're a David Johnson owner, you probably need to overreact a little bit. But for the rest of you, week 1 is not the end-all, be-all. Things will change come week 2.
That is correct. We don't overreact to week 1. You know, it's hard to remember. It's hard to think about. But there were a lot of things that happened that shouldn't have. And it's not like the magnetic shift happened on our polar caps. None of that happened. It's football. It's ebbs and flows. We'll get back to normalcy here soon, folks.
Yeah, and again, if you're 0-1, you're still in playoff contention. I mean, give me a break. It's not the end of the world. No matter how you stumbled across this humble little program, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, on the air at 1350 a.m. ESPN Radio in Des Moines, ESPNDesMoines.com. We're proud to have you on board. Remember our deal with you. Just as you have invested in us, we reciprocate back at you. You reach out to Brian or myself anytime. We're on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, on Twitter, at 515 Fantasy. I'm at Andy Hall Radio. He's at IkeFFB. That's IKEFFB. We will not ignore you. Nothing worse than taking the time to craft a really well-thought-out question, send it off to the people whose opinions you respect, and getting nothing in return. Zero, zip, nada. Sucks, right? Brian and I have made it our mission to respond to anyone and everyone. So that said, please do not hesitate to reach out if we can help in any way. Brian, that reminds me, actually, there's a way to get some in-depth fantasy advice from us.
There is? What? We have that? That's like a real thing? I don't know. I'm the one. So I guess maybe from me, not from you. Is that how it is?
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, so we have a myriad of ways. The best way you can do it is Patreon. We have quite a few Patreon supporters out there right now. I thank you so much for your participation. It comes in 3 different levels. You can get the help. You can get our bargain bins 24 hours early, or you can get the next level, which will include private roster maintenance through private channels. We're going to be communicating to those individuals some private channels, so that way they don't have to go through the normal Twitter and modes like that.
Or email, whatever.
Yeah. So you can get a hold of us privately, and you get the bargain bins 24 hours early, or you can go for the top tier, where you get personal roster overhauls every single week, plus the other 2 levels. So you want us to tune it up, or you want me to tune it up, Make sure you put an asterisk if you just want me to do it. Put an asterisk in there.
There will be no asterisks. Over the next hour and change, we'll go over all the matchups, grade all the fantasy relevant players. 3 really tough questions for Brian in this week's pop quiz. Got to tell you, I'm very excited about these. Bargain bin picks from both of us, which, by the way, has a new sponsor on board. We'll do a listener league recap, the flea flicker. Going to be fun as always. Let's begin, though, as we always do, with some headlines of fantasy note. Cardinals running back David Johnson, we alluded to, injured his wrist in Sunday's loss. It was announced Tuesday he'd be having surgery to repair the damage and will miss 2 to 3 months of action. Head coach Bruce Arians said they hope to have him back, quote, by Christmas. Chris Johnson has been re-signed by the team, looking to create a serious committee approach in Arizona. I'm not sure I want any part of it, Brian. Yuck.
Yeah, that's a tough loss. I don't want anything to do with the remaining running backs. The fact that they're signing people off practice squads and flying them in overnight is not a good sign of confidence in anybody. And, I mean, who would at that point? It's kind of like the Andrew Luck thing. You got a stud like Andrew Luck. You got a stud like David Johnson. If you lose them, the season's done no matter who's behind them, so why even try?
It's not like the Cardinals looked good with David Johnson in the lineup through week 1. I mean, he did what he was doing, but that team just looks all kinds of awful right now, to be honest.
I think the Lions looked absolutely strong.
Well, you could say that.
You know, it's all perspective, I guess. Restore the roar, baby.
Okay, Brian. Jags wide receiver Allen Robinson suffered a torn ACL on Sunday. He'll miss the rest of the season, so not that Jacksonville wants to do a whole lot of passing. They'd rather run the ball 100% of the time if they can, but yeah, that changes some things in Jacksonville. Ravens running back Danny Woodhead aggravated his hamstring on Sunday. He'll miss at least 4 weeks, according to head coach Jim Harbaugh. Could be more if you believe Adam Schefter's report that he'll be out at least 6 and is actually a candidate for IR. Buck Allen stepped in, got a majority of snaps for the team after the injury, more than Terrence West, which did surprise me just a little bit. But Danny Woodhead, a candidate for IR, Brian. Can't say I'm excited, certainly, but can't say I'm too surprised either. This guy has just been injury-prone year after year.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where you had to avoid the injury bug. When you're drafting, everyone says, you can't worry about last year's injuries. Yes, you can. Certain types of injuries are prone to re-aggravation, and this is one of them.
No question. And it was on a red zone target, and he was super involved in that first drive, too. He caught like 3 passes for 30-some yards, got targeted in the end zone, and that was the play in which he aggravated his hamstring. So, unfortunate. It could, what could have been for Danny Woodhead? Who knows? You mentioned Andrew Luck. Colts quarterback Andrew Luck will not play week 2. The team are considering Jacoby Brissett as their starter. You may remember him from the New England Patriots squad last year. He actually did some fill-in there in New England. So Jacoby Brissett, they're weighing their options. It'll be either him or Scott Tolzien for yet another week. Completely torpedoing the fantasy value of anybody and everybody wearing a Colts uniform, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was a Gore owner, and Gore works great when everybody's clicking on all cylinders, but you just got to shake your head.
Texans benched quarterback Tom Savage after only 1/2 of play on Sunday.
That was wicked.
Well, he just looked so bad. He was replaced by rookie Deshaun Watson, who looked halfway decent in week 1. He's already been named the starter for week 2. Tight end C.J. Fedorowicz staying in Houston. He's been placed on IR, his second concussion in a short window of time. So no more C.J. Fedorowicz, the former Hawkeye. And Brian Cushing. Did you hear about this?
Again.
10-game suspension for juicing. Wow.
That's his second offense for juicing.
That's
now.
bad, man. I mean, there had been rumblings, but certainly nothing official.
Like,
and
what
now,
are you doing? Come on.
10 games. That hurts that defense.
You lose your retirement and stuff, by the way.
And by the way, that defense did not look that great in week 1. So there you have it. Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll expects running back Thomas Rawls to be ready for their week 2 game against the Niners. So great matchup to start his season. Boy, they need the help there in that Seattle backfield, no question. Patriots wide receiver Danny Amendola held out of practice yesterday. He's got another concussion issue, and granted it happened last Thursday, but this is not just his first concussion, so it's probably taking a little bit longer to get him back. He may not even be on the field this weekend. Chargers tight end Hunter Henry was not targeted at all in week 1, was on the field less than 50% of the team's offensive snaps. We said it time and time again, Brian. Antonio Gates still on the roster. He's going to be on the field. Hunter Henry, at least a portion of his fantasy prowess gets cannibalized by the old man.
Well, and that's the way it's going to be. We've said it 100 times. They've got the reputation. They've proven that if he was going to get cut for being old, it would have been 2 years ago, 3 years ago even. And that's just the way it's going to be until he gets the record, until Antonio Gates decides he's done, then he's done.
Yep, and it won't be until he gets that record, I guarantee that. Some noteworthy defensive notes. Eagles cornerback Ronald Darby, who the team got in a trade with the Bills during the preseason, is out 4 to 6 weeks with a dislocated ankle. So anybody coming in, taking on those Eagles, fire up that passing team, passing game, no question. Rams D-tackle Aaron Donald expected to return to game action this week following his holdout, so that bolsters an already very strong LA Rams defense, which finished number 1 at the DST position for many leagues, depending on your scoring. Eagles kicker Caleb Sturgis suffered a quad strain in his plant leg. He's expected to miss several weeks. Jake Elliott is the new kicker in Philly, picked up off of some random practice squad. Might be Cincinnati's. I'm not quite sure. But that's sort of it for the headlines of Fantasy Note. We're going to be breaking down all the matchups. Brian and I have 4 of them upcoming, and we'll begin with the Thursday night matchup coming up here in just a bit. We are very, very thankful that you are aboard with us in this Week 2 edition of the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. We're also on iTunes/Apple Podcasts. We're on Google Play, Stitcher. ESPNDesMoines.com is our home on the net for our radio home. We're on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. Brian Eikenberry has the first matchup of many Thursday night. What do you got, buddy?
Houston at Cincinnati, a snoozer of a game.
Ugh.
Terrible Thursday. Why don't you just go clean your wife's room, organize things, do the closet, something.
Happy wife, happy life.
Quarterback Deshaun Watson, I'm going to give him a C+. He got a little bit going. He completed 50% of his passes, had a lot of defensive support. I think if his ankle holds on, he's a risky start against an above-average defense. Running back Lamar Miller, he's going to get a B+ from me. I think the running game is going to be more established against a defense that gave up 113 last week to pair with Miller's 65 from last week. So he should even out. He should be all right. DeAndre Hopkins is going to get a B. 7 receptions on 55 yards. So not a disgusting day, but I wouldn't look for any big air deep down the field passes anymore out of Watson. So that hurts Hopkins' value, obviously.
He was targeted a ton, though, last week, if you noticed.
Yeah, I mean, what else you got? But I'm not trusting it yet.
Yeah, I hear you.
Nope. Braxton Miller, bench. And you heard about Fedorowicz, so I'll do it for the tight ends. This is why I don't mention him anymore. It's boring.
Yeah, where's Owen Daniels when you need him?
Darn it. Onto the Bengals side of the ball, quarterback Andy Dalton. I'm just going to leave him on a bench. Look, disgusting showing. 4 interceptions, 5 sacks, 170 yards. That is going to be a tough one to recover from mentally, and I think Houston's defense is going to try and get him in the mindset that the Ravens had him in last week. The running back situation, Gio Mixon, who's it going to be? B-. Hill, I didn't see much coming out of him. I did see this becoming a Gio Mixon split, more so going forward, but Mixon was terrible as well. I have to wait for other games just because it was such a disaster last week. You just kind of got to scratch everyone's last week performance. A.J. Green's going to get a B+. I give him a bump in front of the hometown crowd, but clearly his 70 yards last week were the highlight of his game. Needs a confident Dalton to give your fantasy football team a boost. Tyler Boyd's going to get a C. Boyd and LaFell were targets a handful of times, but again, nothing to go off of.
How about Tyler Eifert? You like him this week at all?
I told you I wasn't doing tight ends.
I know. I hate that, though, because people want to know, do you start Tyler Eifert this week?
Yeah, I think so.
He looked awful last week.
Everybody looked awful, and that's really the point with the Bengals is that train wreck, you can't judge anything off of it, so you're going to have to just pretend they were on bye last week.
Cleveland at Baltimore. How's this for a barn burner? Start with the Browns. Deshaun Kaiser, I'm just going to leave him on the bench. The Ravens secondary held Andy Dalton to 144 passing yards, no scores, 4 INT last week. Not a great week to experiment with the Browns rookie. Isaiah Crowell, a C+, a pure volume play, otherwise a below-average option against a Baltimore defense that held Bengals runners to 3.5 yards per carry and no scores last week. Duke Johnson, I'm leaving on the bench. Since these pass-catching backs were held to virtually nothing last week, I don't think Duke can do any better. Corey Coleman, I'll give a B- to because, quote, somebody's got to catch the ball, right? Wouldn't appear Kenny Britt has much left in the tank. He might not even be on the field this week. And besides Coleman, there's a bunch of nobodies in Cleveland. At least A.J. Green, Cincinnati's number one, finished with a respectable stat line last week despite being held out of the end zone. Coleman scored twice against these Ravens in September of last season, so that is of note. Over to the Ravens, Joe Flacco, a B+. The Browns had a surprisingly strong showing against the Le'Veon Bell-led Steelers offense, holding him to only 32 yards on 10 carries. Flacco won't need to rely on his patchwork running game. He'll be happy to take to the air as Big Ben did in Week 1, and as he has done traditionally against Cleveland. He averaged 25 fantasy points in the 2 games last year to Joe Flacco. Terrence West, I'll give him a C grade. Hasn't scored against Cleveland in 4 prior meetings, hasn't topped 77 combo yards more than once. West yields touches to Buck Allen, which cannibalizes his fantasy value. Speaking of Allen, I'll give him a C+, a slight bump over West. He saw more snaps, more touches than West in Week 1, and while that may have been game flow, I think Allen's potential is greater, albeit slightly greater than West at his age. Jeremy Maclin, I give a B+ to. He's fared relatively well against the Browns in 2 previous meetings dating back to 2012. He caught a total of 12 passes for 145 yards and a score. Clearly, he's Flacco's favorite deep ball threat after seeing them together in Week 1. Mike Wallace, a B-. He found the end zone twice in his matchup against this team last year, but hasn't caught more than 4 passes in any one game in 10 meetings with the Browns dating back to 2009. A threat to score, of course, but I don't expect huge volume from Wallace.
All right, on to Chicago at Tampa Bay. Mike Glennon, he gets to wave hi to his old team. Going to get a B-. Not a great showing. Nothing left in the cupboards as far as his starting roster of his surrounding cast members. Moving forward, he should be on your bench. If you had him at any kind of waiver, I see 0 opportunity. Jordan Howard, the only person left who's going to get you points. I'm going to give a B-. Literally the only offense on the team. And if you have him, it's still a shaky start now. I see the Chicago Bears being the 32nd ranked offense in the league from here going forward.
Brutal.
Then what do we got? Kendall Wright and Marcus Wheaton are your – I can't even give them a look at this point. No point in me wasting your breath. Tampa Bay side of the ball, quarterback Jameis Winston, he's going to get a B+. With no Week 1 data to go off of, these are kind of up-in-the-air starts, but I'll offer you this. The Bears gave up 300 yards last week, and I would expect the same again this week. So – Jameis Winston, a lot of hype for him this year. Go ahead, give him a B+. Throw him in your lineup. He's ready to go. Running back Jaquiz Rodgers, B. Looking to make the best of his opportunities, trying not to give many carries back to Doug Martin when he returns. He has been proven serviceable and worth a waiver add to start if you can. Wide receiver Mike Evans, I'm going to give him an A. Big debut for the big guy. Too many B's in there.
Holy hell, Brian. Another B.
Yep, and a good year where he was able to catch passes. Expect the same here. Hopefully he lives up to his ADP this year. And Deshaun Jackson, B+. I think he's the big wild card. He's always been a boomer bust kind of guy, except when he was at his peak in Philly. I'm hoping this team's stability and surrounding cast give him that support structure he needs to be that consistent player he was in Philly.
I know your friend Ryan is dying to know. Are there any tight ends of fantasy note in that Tampa Bay offense?
Cameron Brate, I guess you could give him a go.
I know. It wouldn't be that first round pick, though, would it?
O.J. Simpson?
O.J. Simpson. Nice. All right, so yeah, Cameron Brate, you've heard it here. Minnesota at Pittsburgh. First, the Vikings. Sam Bradford, a B-. I'm tempering my expectations against a much better defense this week. Pittsburgh gets after the quarterback, and though the Vikings O-line did a good job of keeping Sam upright in Week 1, face it was the Saints, all right? That said, if Bradford gets time in the pocket, I do think Diggs and Thielen can create some space against a very young but very talented Steelers secondary. Dalvin Cook, also a B-. Steelers held Browns runners to under 3 yards per carry last week, and though Cook is in line for a decent amount of volume here, he doesn't appear to be a breakaway type of back that can at any time bust out like a 50-plus yard run. He does catch passes, though, so I don't hate him this week. Just not as in love as I was with last week's matchup. Stephon Diggs, I'll give a B grade to. 7 catches on 8 targets last week. A very good indication of how Diggs will perform out of his new spot in the formation on the outside. Bradford looked for him quite a bit, especially down deep where Diggs converted twice for scores. Adam Thielen, also a B grade. His value is in full point PPR formats. He won't score a ton of touchdowns, but likely sees a lot of targets week to week in the 15 to 20-yard range downfield. I don't see the Vikings changing the game plan much from last week, despite a much more formidable foe. The slot is perfect for Adam Thielen's skill set. I'm really glad to see him there, and he's thriving through 1 week of the season. Kyle Rudolph, I'll give him a C grade. Aside from his touchdown catch, he wasn't utilized much in the Vikings passing attack last Monday night. Only 3 targets. Of course, he did catch all 3 of them. The conversion rate, fantastic thus far. But if Diggs and Thielen continue to work well on the outside, Rudolph becomes nothing more than a red zone threat, if that. For the Steelers, Big Ben, give him a B-. Despite all the success he typically has at home, this is a really tough matchup for Big Ben and company. The Vikings held Drew Brees to virtually nothing outside of the garbage time scored to tight end Kobe Fleener late on Monday. The front 7 will pressure Ben into quick decisions. Rhodes and Newman will have their hands full with Brown and Bryant, but should be able to hang with them for the most part. Le'Veon Bell, a B-. He looked a bit rusty last week in Cleveland. Did you watch that at all, Brian, any of that game?
Yeah, did. I just was hoping that this wasn't real life, but it was. I was not waking up from wisdom teeth.
Doesn't get any easier in week 2 for Bell, who will likely see a ton of volume rushing and receiving, but will be held to less than 4 yards per carry. And unless the Steelers get down inside the 5, might be held out of the end zone again. Remember, he didn't score a touchdown till week 10 of 2016. Antonio Brown is a B grade. You're starting him no matter what, but don't be surprised if he's held to less than you're accustomed to. The Viking secondary is one of the best in the league, and this is a great test for them. Martavius Bryant, I mentioned, I'll give him a C+. The Minnesota does not allow the long ball. Bryant's game is predicated on succeeding downfield. Unless something out of the ordinary happens, a D-back falling down or something crazy like that, Bryant's ceiling should be pretty low in this matchup. And Jesse James, a C grade. The Vikings were one of the league's better defenses against the tight end position in 2016, allowing a total of only 4 scores all year long. James has filled the old Heath Miller role nicely through week 1, but his 2 scores were on the league's worst versus the tight end in 2016, the Cleveland Browns, so you have to keep that in mind.
Oh, do I have another one? Was I not paying attention?
No, that's it. We have time to talk.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm like, what's the signal? I thought I did all of mine.
Here's a little inside baseball for everybody. So I always give hand cues because I've got the timer here, and we have to keep these segments at a certain length for the radio. So I'm over here giving Brian all these signals, and sometimes it gets lost in translation. But anyway, I was just letting you know that was my last matchup,
fun.
And we have some time to, discuss a little bit if you like.
So are you expecting any kind of magic out of Tampa Bay?
I don't know. I think, this is a very talented team. I think that the offensive success they'll have won't surprise me. I think what will surprise more people is how much better their defense will be here in 2017. That's what I think about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year.
Do you think they're going to make the playoffs after having to play 16 games straight?
I think they have a very good chance if they can stay healthy, and that's a big if. I realize that. They've got a capable back in Jacquizz Rodgers the first few weeks of the season. Doug Martin will come back, and we'll see what kind of Doug Martin we get. It's an odd year this year, so this should be a good year for Doug Martin, I think. I think it's odd years is the trend that he has pretty good years. That receiving core, you can't argue with that. Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson. Keep them healthy. Everything will be just fine. I think Jameis Winston takes another step forward. So, again, I don't think the offense will surprise me as much as probably the fact that I think that defense is going to be so much more improved this year over last.
I think they're going to try to create an artificial bye week. If they get on a good run where they're going to push for the division, I think they're going to rest their starters if they have a lead and rely on their defense to hold them in the game to give people rest.
It's going to be interesting to see how they approach the fact that they have to play 16 weeks in a row now, having that week 1 bye. Obviously, throws things off a bit, skews things a bit, but we'll see how that all goes. I do like that team a lot, though, this year. They're going to contend for the division, no question. More matchups from Brian and me coming your way here in just a bit on 515 Fantasy Football. Stick around. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday on 1350 AM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. We're breaking down all the Week 2 matchups, grading all the fantasy-relevant players. And in this next matchup, Brian, I have a very good feeling that there aren't too many players you will not want to have in your lineup. New England at New Orleans. We'll start with the Patriots. Tom Brady. An A grade. Get ready for a fantasy feast against that Saints defense. If it doesn't happen this week, there's going to be an awful lot of talk about what is wrong with Tom Brady. Is there something going on we don't know about? I think this is as perfect a matchup as it gets. I think the only thing that could happen is maybe they jump out so quickly, so fast, that they rely on the running game to salt things away, and Tom just gets what he gets in the beginning, and that'll be it. But we'll see. I'd still give him an A grade. Mike Gillislee, I give a B+ to. He won't get 3 touchdowns every week. That's just not going to happen. He may get one here, but I believe the Pats will be airing it out. They're angry about last Thursday. I mean, who wouldn't be? Primetime game. Everybody's watching, and they get spanked by the Kansas City Chiefs.
Whoops.
So there you have it. James White, I'll give a C+ to in PPR formats. White, he's so undervalued, this guy. Definitely worth a look in your flex spot if you're in a PPR. Brandon Cooks, A grade against his old team in New Orleans. I expect Cooks to get fed and eat very well in this one. Chris Hogan, a B grade. If Amendola is held out due to his concussion issues, Hogan's a great dart throw in a plus matchup. Rob Gronkowski gets an obvious A. He was virtually invisible last week against a tough Kansas City defense. Not the case this week. I think Gronk will show up. He did have the chance at that touchdown last week, but it got overturned, unfortunately, and then he was pretty much invisible the rest of the game. For the Saints, Drew Brees, a B+. New England isn't quite as stout as Minnesota in the secondary, but they do tend to scheme against an opponent's biggest strength, and in the case of the Saints, that's obviously the passing game, which begins with Brees. Not worried that he'll produce. I'm just tempering my expectations a bit. Mark Ingram, I'll give a B+ to. Considering what Kareem Hunt was able to do to the Patriots in Week 1, I like Ingram here as a volume play. Yes, Peterson will get a few touches. Yes, Kamara as well. But Ingram is a combination of what those two bring to the table and will get the majority. I think that's a definite. Michael Thomas, a B grade. He looked human on Monday night, catching only 5 of 8 targets, being held to a modest yardage total without a score. Growing pains likely to continue against a Patriots defense looking to slow a passing game in their own home building. Ted Ginn, a C+, didn't factor into the game as much as I thought he might in Week 1, so I'm lowering my love for him against a Patriots defense that doesn't let many receivers get behind them. And finally, Kobe Fleener, I'll give a B- to. As expected, saw a decent amount of work in the absence of Willie Snead in Week 1. That should continue against New England this week, who are one of the better defenses against tight ends in 2016. I'm not expecting a ton of production, but stranger things have happened.
See, I'm not totally out on Ted Ginn yet. I think that was really just a byproduct of just the absolute disaster. I think New Orleans learned a couple of lessons about their offensive playbook, and you can kiss Adrian Peterson goodbye.
Well, that might be the case. That is certainly going to be an option down the road.
Not as advertised. All right, we're going to head to Kansas City, Philly at KC. Quarterback Carson Wentz. You know, here it's tough for me to give him a grade, but I think this week, leave him on the bench. Look, I think he did the right thing. There is an uptick. I have a green arrow trending up for me. 300 yards, spread the ball all around. Something worth watching, except against a Kansas City's defense that's riding pretty high. I think they got a lot of motivation, a hometown crowd, going to be loud, going to be crazy. Not a good start for Wentz. Blunt's same category for me, C+. He got the rock 14 times, so he's getting the volume. He only averaged 3.3 yards per carry. This week won't be much better, so stash him away for this week if you have other people. Alshon Jeffrey's going to get a B-. Did nothing with his targets. And he isn't Wentz's favorite. They get a break with Eric Berry being out now, but I still think he's going to be a tricky start. Nelson Aguilar, he's going to get a B, better grade here. Ninja play, he had the eye of Wentz and made him his comfort blanket there for Wentz. I'm not ready to turn the corner yet on him because he's been such a dud, but 6 catches, 86 yards, something to keep an eye on. Yeah, I'll even throw your tight end Ertz in there. He had a lot of action.
You have to throw Ertz in this mix.
Lot of action there as well. Quarterback on the Chiefs side, quarterback Alex Smith. I'm going to give him a B+, coming off a career game with him. Limited or perceived to be limited weapons. Smith led the offense and was stunning output against the defending champs. 350-plus passing yards. Expect the same in front of his hometown crowd. And just to let that rookie know, he is not playing this year at all, only in rest. Running back Kareem Hunt, he's going to get an A. Let's hope he continues to do the same. One of the top 3 performers in your lineup, period, out of Week 1. I bet he's not on your bench this week, is he, Andy?
No, he will not be on the bench.
Tyreek Hill, somebody that surprised me. I had Hill as one of the big busts this year. I was not on him at all. B+, 133 and a touchdown. Way better than I thought, but let's not overreact to week 1. We've talked about this. Let's not overreact to week 1. I catch myself doing it over time, so I'm not going to anoint Hill as the giant wide receiver, top of the class.
He's the tie freak. I'm taking that. I'm taking the opposite stance.
Are you?
Tie freak, baby.
Yuck.
I love the guy.
Then you got wide receiver Chris Conley over here. He's just sitting here with a C. Definitely an afterthought from last week on the depth chart. But I see that becoming the norm. Lots of hungry young talent on the team fighting for the ball, and he just isn't a big enough option yet in the playbook or really on the roster period. Your tight end boy, he didn't do much, so you guys just got an attitude problem.
Oh, totally. But, I mean, that's part of his charm, too. I mean, if you kind of want a guy that's just – he's going to fight it out no matter what. That's kind of what I like about Travis Kelce. But I think, like Gronk, he disappeared last week. Kelce wasn't a part of that at all, but I think Kelce will show up this week.
Yeah, I think – so just for Buck, comment on both of those, I think the game – it's kind of one of those where, like, you're giving your buddy crap, he kind of gets mad, so then he kind of just comes back a little bit more aggressive on you. And then before you know it, when like 12 and 14, and then all of a sudden you and your best friend are just throwing haymakers at each other. That's kind of like what the game was last night. It just kept getting a little bit more aggressive, and then at the end of the day, it was just people just throwing haymakers, and then it was 40-40 or something, whatever the score was.
Are you talking about last Thursday's game? What game are you talking? Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. I think the Patriots got
carried away.
Well, they got really angry because that team, I mean, Kansas City did a great job of stopping everything New England was trying to do. They made Tom Brady, arguably the greatest of all time at the position, look very pedestrian.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
crazy.
Crazy. Absolutely. My last matchup of this segment, Tennessee at Jacksonville. Begin with the Titans. Marcus Mariota, a C grade. At home, Mariota has fared very well against the Jags in recent history. On the road, not so much. In their 2016 matchup in Jacksonville, Mariota finished with a total of only 8 completions for 99 yards and a score. In 2015, he finished with more yardage, but no scores on the road in Jacksonville. I love what the Jags have done defensively. They look great in week 1. I'm not loving Mariota's chances of success here. DeMarco Murray is C+. Remember what I just said about Marcus Mariota? Same exact deal for Murray, though we have a slightly smaller sample size. Say that 5 times fast, by the way. Murray scored 6 fantasy points in Jacksonville last year. 6. As opposed to the 18+ he scored at home in this matchup. The Jags held Texans runners to under 100 yards completely out of the end zone. Could be more of the same this week for Murray and company. Derrick Henry, I'm just going to leave on the bench until I see a better snap percentage. He's best just sitting there on the bench as Murray's handcuff. Rashard Matthews, a C+. The target share was pretty evenly distributed among the Titans receivers in week 1, if you noticed. Matthews got 9, so did Delaney Walker. Decker got 8. And the big surprise, rookie Corey Davis, who got 10 targets. Now, I'm not going to get too excited. This is a very difficult matchup for the Tennessee pass catchers. Everybody gets a C, except for Matthews, who gets a C+, because he actually scored in both meetings last year. Walker, I'll bump up a bit to the C+ as well. He didn't pile up a ton of yards, but he also found the end zone last season in Jacksonville. Over to the Jags. Blake Bortles, a C grade. Surprisingly, he's been pretty good in recent history against the Titans, finishing both 2016 matchups with an average of, get this, 30 fantasy points from Blake Bortles. However, without Allen Robinson, with Leonard Fournette, it's a whole different ballgame. If the Jags could get away with that, like a 90-10 pass-to-run ratio, they would do it in a heartbeat. Bortles may take a few shots downfield with Allen Hearns, who's known for that, but I don't see his path to victory through the air by and large. Leonard Fournette, I give an A grade to. The Titans were one of the league's elite run-stopping defenses in 2016, allowing the second fewest rushing yards, only 10 scores on the ground. So why the A grade? Fournette is a pure volume play, so I wouldn't be concerned with his 3.8 yards per carry in week 1 against the Texans. With the potential for 30 touches week in and week out, there's plenty to like about Leonard Fournette. Marcus Lee, I'll give him a B-. Marquise. Oakland pass catchers fared relatively well against the Titans, who gave up the 3rd most receiving yards in 2016, an average of over 286 yards per game to opposing receivers. Without Robinson, Lee looks to benefit the most in targets and yards. Finally, Allen Hearns. Let's talk about Allen Hearns for a second. A deep ball scoring threat that scored in his lone head-to-head against Tennessee last season. Hearns is very boom or bust. I wouldn't start him unless you're desperate. But I will say, I think if Jacksonville does get a passing touchdown here against a very tough pass defense, Allen Hearns might be that guy. I am giving him a C grade in this matchup, however. So we have another round of matchups to go through, some more fantasy-relevant players to grade before we get to a pop quiz that I'm very proud of. So stick around. All of that still to come and more on the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. The 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. Another round of matchups, beginning with Brian.
Ooh, here we go.
I love that.
That was wicked.
Way cool.
Buffalo at Carolina, quarterback Tyrod Taylor. I always want to say Thyroid Taylor. It just kind of rolls off my tongue because Tyrod kind of looks like thyroid.
Okay, Brian.
Well, not looking much for production here. 218 yards last week, so nothing flashy. Headed to Carolina. Will not be a regular starter in your roster as of this point, but could be a good bye-week option. Cough, week 9. Cough, if the matchup approves. Just saying, look ahead.
Hey, now.
Running back LaShawn McCoy, Shady had 160 combined yards, 110 which was on the ground. Always an A start. Run pass dual threat, especially when you're the only offense in town. Jordan Matthews, he's going to get a B. 2 of his 3 targets. 60 yards total, so a normal day for Matthews. Was never solid, but still not high grade on my roster yet. Zay Jones, he's going to get the B-. 1 of 4 on his targets. 1 catch, 4 targets. Not sure if they were just overthrows, underthrows, or he just couldn't catch. I didn't really get to see much of this game. Hopefully the rookie gets up to speed quickly and Tyrod gets him the ball more. Force it to him. He's the big guy. Carolina side of the ball, quarterback Cam Newton, he's going to get a B. I think Cam got his warm-up game out of the way. He's at home, so I would expect it to be a much better game. Buffalo's defensive stats this year, I think, are inflated. Wow, look at Buffalo. They're doing awesome. Oh, that's right. They played the Jets. Never mind. So I think those were a little bit inflated. Stu McCaffrey, what are we going to do here? I'm going to give them both B+. Stu out-touched McCaffrey, just for the record, but McCaffrey was targeted 7 times in the passing game.
Where Stu is non-existent.
Right. So if you combine everybody's numbers, their touches plus their targets, both were an even 20.
Oh, there you go.
So that was pretty telling to me. I thought, oh, my God, because I watched the highlight reel and I seen McCaffrey. Oh, my God, he's way out-touched him. But then you look at the numbers, proof's in the pudding. If you add them together, they both had 20 touches or targets in the passing game. So they were even money.
And they're very different roles in that offense.
Yeah.
Very different roles.
So I'm going to monitor this one pretty closely, but that was a little stat that stood out to me that was kind of neat. So there you go. You heard it here first, folks. Wide receiver Kelvin Benjamin, B-. Not a stunning debut, but we don't overreact here. Clearly, he will be more focused in here. I think he's better than McCaffrey in the passing game, even though McCaffrey outshined everybody in the wide receiver category last week. But I think the better McCaffrey is, the better Benjamin's going to be.
Sure.
I think just once they get it figured out, there were a lot of new pieces, a lot of new attitudes, and a lot of new playbooks. So I think they just got to get it figured out. And once everyone understands their roles, I think it's going to help Kelvin Benjamin out. Then you got Funchess. He's just sitting here and wondering where his spot went to. Targeted 2 times, and McCaffrey is more the wide receiver 2 in this offense right now.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, 100%.
Kind of like Tariq Cohen in the Chicago offense.
Yep. So outright droppable at this point if you're holding on to Funchess for a prayer.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There you go.
Okay. You didn't mention Charles Clay, who scored 2 touchdowns last week.
You know what? Drop in the bucket.
Charles Clay is a guy who will be targeted because the rest of that passing game is so mediocre, aside from LaShawn McCoy.
But are you carrying 2 tight ends is my point.
No, but if you're in a bad place in tight end, if you waited too long and maybe you were a Hunter Henry guy, I would rather have Charles Clay.
Well, duh.
So drop Hunter Henry and pick up Charles Clay.
There you go.
Greg Olsen, on the other hand, you didn't mention him.
Why would I?
Because Greg Olsen is a stud.
He's 95.
Okay. Well, he hasn't missed a game in like 10 seasons
Yeah,
now.
him and Witten both. Neither are on my team.
I am... How do you like that?
But not the Robert Downey Jr., the Black Sabbath one.
Correct. The only one. Arizona, Indy. Oh, boy. For the Cardinals,
Whoa.
Carson Palmer. I'll give a Carson Palmer. I'm giving him a B+. All right? If Jared Goff can throw over 300 yards with a score and no turnovers as he did in week 1, I'm confident that Palmer will bounce back from a horrendous 2017 debut against a Colts secondary that isn't healthy and isn't good. Losing David Johnson actually helps Palmer's chance for success, particularly in a matchup like this. I don't like any of the running backs right now. Kerwin Williams is the only one I'm giving a grade to, and that's a C+. Indy was surprisingly stout in slowing Todd Gurley last week. While that might be a byproduct of a subpar offensive line in L.A., it's not as if Arizona are that much better. The Cards are in full-on committee hell at the running back position. Williams' only shot at succeeding is if he plunges one in from up close. I think he'll be the short yardage goal line guy. Larry Fitzgerald, an A grade, saw 13 targets week 1 against the Lions. We'll continue to see that kind of steady work against Devontae Davis-less Colts secondary that has no one that can hang with Fitz. John Brown, a B-, only 4 catches, 32 yards last week, but was targeted 9 times by Carson Palmer. Nine times.
9.
A number I'm very comfortable with, actually, because eventually you know he's going to hit on a long one. It's only a matter of time. J.J. Nelson, a C grade. He scored Arizona's only receiving touchdown against Detroit, 3rd or 4th in target opportunities, meaning he's very touchdown-dependent week to week. A dangerous risk if you do plan to roll the dice on J.J. Nelson. And for the Colts, Frank Gore. Notice I skipped right over the quarterback position.
Yeah.
Frank Gore gets a C+. The Colts were able to do very little against a tough Rams front 7 in week 1. He may not look great running the ball, but the reason Gore can succeed here against Arizona's equally formidable run stoppers is the fact that he catches passes. Theo Riddick caught one for a score last week. I think Gore has a similar chance here. He just needs the opportunity. T.Y. Hilton, I give a C grade to. A great stat from Graham Barfield at Fantasy Guru, Brian. In games T.Y. Hilton has played without Andrew Luck as his quarterback, he has finished wide receiver 30, wide receiver 27, wide receiver 50 or worse, wide receiver 10, wide receiver 50 or worse, wide receiver 20, wide receiver 50 or worse, wide receiver 40, and wide receiver 50
Seems
or
about
worse.
right.
Bottom line, Hilton is a huge bust considering how he was being drafted when Andrew Luck is not under center. Dante Moncrief gets a C. He's a dart throw at best. He shines as a deep ball threat with a potentially relatively unknown commodity playing quarterback this week for the Colts, or Scott Tolzien, who we know sucks. I wouldn't take a chance on Moncrief. Jack Doyle I'm leaving on the bench until we see a target share worthy of a starting spot. I'm not advocating you start him. Now, there's another tight end that people were talking about as a potential sleeper going into this season.
Wah.
Without Andrew Luck, though, sorry,
Nope.
just not going to happen.
All right, let's rip off the super exciting New York Jets and the always going to score on your roster, Oakland Raiders. Quarterback Josh McCown, up bench, always and forever will be. Bilal Powell, Matt Forte, what are we doing here? What's going on? My thoughts on both of these running backs are very similar. The Jets refuse to let Powell be the workload and feel obligated to get Forte involved. They will always play from behind and should always be literally watching from your bench. I am not confident in starting Bilal Powell.
You know what? I am one of the last people to be fighting this tooth and nail. But in the end, the Jets are going to do what the Jets are going to do, which is try to lose as many games as possible this season. And if they think Bilal Powell might actually give them a chance to win once in a while. I mean, listen, they've got serious competition for worst team in the league right now. The Bills are out of contention because they're 1-0. They won a game. But a serious 0-16 candidate, depending on the quarterback situation, is going to be Indianapolis this year. So, yeah.
I would say Chicago.
They played Atlanta tough, Brian. I don't know. They might actually pull a couple games out this year. I still say, the Jets are the worst team in the league, but boy, Indy's giving them a run for their money.
Yeah, right now they are. So that's how I feel about the situation there. Robbie Anderson, he's going to get a C+. It's terrible. You can keep him in your back pocket. Likely going to have a couple of hot flashes in the pan, but it was one of those where I was excited, the only person here to catch the ball. And then what's going on?
Hot flashes like a menopausal woman.
Yeah, pretty much. Couple of hot flashes in the pan.
Oh, that's funny, Brian. Thank you.
Jermaine Kearse, you can leave him on the bench. Even though he split targets with Anderson, he's still not the number one and not worth risking it. I would rather roll with a number 3 wide receiver on some other teams than any Jets receiver right now. Oakland side of the ball here, quarterback Derek Carr, 260-2, looked sharp and did what needed to be done to win last week. I think this will be the big statement win here, 303 this week. I think that's what's going to happen. Running back Marshawn Lynch, I'm going to give him an A, begrudgingly. 76 yards last week, 0 touchdowns. Not quite the start many had hoped for, but the Jets are the best medicine for mediocrity. Amari Cooper, he's going to get an A. Cooper had a touchdown early, then settled down. I'm okay with 60 in a score, but that should help out, even though we did have a Seth Roberts sighting.
Told you.
But Cooper had 13 targets, and he dropped 3 touchdown passes, just for what it's worth. Crabtree B had good yards, typically no touchdowns. I think he's going to be the same guy he was last year, just a little lower in the yardage game.
There you have it. Another set of matchups. We have a few more of those to get through. We also have the Flea Flicker. We'll talk Listener League coming up. We got a new sponsor on board this year. Excited about that. But up next is Brian's favorite segment. One of mine as well. It is the Pop Quiz, 3 of Fantasy's toughest questions, week 2, to be fired at Brian rapid fire and allow Brian to just dig into the recesses of his brain and come up with the best answer he possibly can and hope to God he's right. We'll hear that next. Pop Quiz on 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. Into hour number 2, 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines, Iowa. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. I'm at Andy Hall Radio. He's at IkeFFB. That's IKEFFB. Over 40 years of combined fantasy experience between the two of us. Happy to help you out if you ever need something. Facebook, Twitter. If you want to become a patron, that would be fantastic as well and help give back to the show.
Patreon means priority.
Is that what it means?
No.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It does now.
I guess Brian just came up with a new definition for what Patreon is. Priority meaning what? Meaning...
Hey, we get busy. Look, here's the reality. We get busy. There's a lot of stuff going on, but we've got commitments all over the place. Hey, we will dignify your response, but we may not be able to get to all 20 of your questions on a Sunday morning. And if you're a Patreon, you're going to get that back channel access directly right into us. That gives you that priority line.
Well, and it totally makes sense, too, because if you're financially helping to support the show, you're going to be first in line. That's just the way it is. Brian and I do take great pride in responding to everybody, by the way, on social media. But you're right, Brian. Sometimes people are hitting us with 20 questions on a Sunday morning, and sometimes we just can't get to all of them. So as much as we'd love to help, we do have some folks that are helping us out financially, and, let's face it, we appreciate the hell out of that. So we're going to help them out, and we hope you'll become a patron as well. All right, time for the pop quiz, Brian. 3 of Fantasy's toughest questions. Are you ready for these? Because I'm very proud of these questions.
Easy.
Oh, you say that. So what basically this is I ask the question, Brian gives his answer, and then I tell him why he's wrong. So here we go. Question number 1. Cardinals running back David Johnson expected to miss 2 to 3 months following his Week 1 injury that resulted in surgery on his wrist. In redraft leagues with no IR spot, should David Johnson be dropped?
Yeah. Why not? What are you going to do? You going to hold on to him forever?
He was your number 1 pick.
Who may not come back this year. Who may not come back this year.
But in the off chance that he does come back,
and you don't
just
have
in
an
time
IR
for your
spot,
playoff run, you sure?
Look, cautiously optimistic doesn't work in the recovery game. This isn't like a high ankle sprain where he's going to get some stem cells and do some magic yam rubs. This is real.
Magic yam rubs. That's awesome.
This is real, and he ain't coming back. If you're a DJ owner, you should think about being done for the rest of the year.
He should absolutely be dropped.
Yeah.
I know it's tough to hear, but as painful as a conclusion as it may be, even if Johnson returns to the field, let's say he returns to the field in 2 months, the earliest he gets back is Week 11. In Week 11, the Cardinals head to Houston to take on a tough Texans front 7. By then, as bad as the Cards looked in their opener, I'm expecting them to have already been eliminated from playoff contention. And at that point, what benefit is there to trotting Johnson out and risk aggravating the injury? By keeping him on your roster, you're eliminating one very valuable roster spot for at least 10 weeks. With bye weeks, more injuries sure to happen throughout the course of your season. You will need that spot at some point. Many may not heed this bit of advice, but I'm telling you, David Johnson can and should be dropped in redrafts with no IR spot. If you're in a keeper league, do not drop him. If you have an IR spot, put him on it. But if you're in a redraft with no IR, David Johnson can be dropped.
And if you're in a keeper league and he was your guy and there's penalties for you losing, you should probably start setting $5 aside now because you might be the Rob again.
Wow. Okay, so the nickname, the Rob, goes to the team that finishes in last place every year. By default, I was given that title last year in Brian's league, even though I didn't earn it. But then this guy now this year that owns the title of the Rob isn't really the Rob. Now, I think he should be penalized for
I approve of it.
Wow.
I think it's funny because
That's too
so
bad.
I mean it might be a fun though thing. So yeah, you gotta be the Rob, but you might be able to have like some rendition. So like if I lose because my name is Commissiosaurus Rex, I would be the Robosaurus Rex.
So, I mean, how could I have, let's see. My team name is Damage Incorporated. I could have been Robbage Incorporated. All right, on to question number 2 in the pop quiz. Kansas City rookie, running back Kareem Hunt had a record-setting debut last Thursday night in Foxborough, finishing with 246 combo yards and 3 touchdowns. Is Kareem Hunt a lock for top 5 at the position, Brian?
I wouldn't get too carried away yet. It's just too early to tell. I feel the same way about Dalvin Cook. I feel the same way about a lot of rookies. Had this been his 3rd year and you had something to go off of a couple years in the NFL, look, when defenses figure out how to play a guy, makes a world of difference.
You're so wrong on this. The answer is absolutely yes.
Oh, is there a bet on this one?
As you know from listening to this show, once Spencer Ware was lost for the season, Kareem Hunt very quickly became my number 1 rookie target. I had him ranked as a high-end running back, too, with major upside in an Andy Reid offense. The workload is there. The skill set is incredible from what we've seen. The offensive line looks great. The defense should keep most games close. And the Chiefs have a formidable passing game to ensure nobody can get away with stacking the box against Kareem Hunt. The running back 5 in fantasy football has finished with an average of 244 fantasy points in the past 3 seasons in half PPR leagues. Hunt has 43 points. To reach 244, he needs to average only 13.4 fantasy points per contest the rest of the way. In half PPR leagues, that should be a virtual lock, assuming full health for a 16-game schedule. Not only will Hunt finish top 5, I'm projecting him as top 3 finish in 2017, Brian.
Is this a bet?
Do you want it to be a bet?
Sure do.
Sounds good.
$1,000.
So top 5 is the bet, right?
Yep.
Okay, so top 5 and how much? Or what do you want to bet?
In normal format.
Okay, so standard. Now we're going to go standard?
Yeah.
See, I think he derives like a percentage of his success is via PPR. I don't know if I'm willing to take that bet if you're betting standard.
Yeah.
I would
I'm
compromise
not betting hybrids.
I would compromise half PPR.
No.
You're not going to do it?
No.
All right, there is no bet then. Sorry, Brian, no bet.
So then he's not a running back.
He's a dual threat guy.
I didn't realize you still gave out participation trophies, Andy, for catching the ball. Good job. You caught the ball. You did your job. You get a point. There you go.
He's a running back that catches the ball.
So
he shouldn't be rewarded for that?
No.
Okay.
You do in yards.
Okay, Brian. Someday you'll realize that
So
this
is
is
there
a
a-
passing
is there a-
league.
Is there a PPR running back only league? I would like that. You could do a PPR, but the points per reception only counted for running backs.
I've seen that for tight ends. I've seen
That
it
would actually
specialized.
be-
I mean, you can do that.
That would actually be kind of cool. I might approve of that one.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad you're open to it because standard leagues, they're fine, but you should really diversify that portfolio. I'm just saying.
Nope.
So go ahead, be specialized with your scoring system. You're going to disagree with me on
My
this.
scoring is special.
Oh, it's not at all. Your scoring is so blasé.
No,
Yeah,
it's
it is.
a perfect league.
All right.
And that's why you suck at it.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. We'll see how it turns out this season. I guarantee you I will not finish last place ever in your league.
Is that a bet too?
That's a bet. For as
Well,
long as I'm in your league, I will never finish last.
Justin threw up 50 points. He scored the record low. In our leagues,
That's bad.
he started Andy Dalton for what it's worth.
Yep.
That is the lowest score in our league's history.
It's amazing.
In the 7 years now.
Just amazing.
That is the lowest.
All right, so there is a third question in my pop quiz.
Okay.
So you got number 2 wrong. Number 3 is, if you're a Jordan Howard owner in a PPR league, is the correct level of concern over Tariq Cohen A, none, B, some, or C, complete panic?
It is complete panic because Tariq Cohen did everything in the passing game.
Yeah,
Pretty
Jordan
much.
Howard, again, he's not known as a pass catcher, that's for sure.
Well-
Although he did catch a few passes.
So Tariq Cohen had 66 yards rushing on his 5 attempts, and he had 12 targets. That's an issue for me. If I'm in a PPR and I own the running back, and a running back other than mine is getting 12 targets, that's an issue.
Okay. The answer is A, none.
Ridiculous.
The look on your face. Listen, PPR league or not, Howard's workload is not in jeopardy here. In week 1, a negative game script resulted in 13 carries for Howard for 51 yards and a score. He even caught 3 passes for 14 yards for what it's worth. Cohen rushed 5 times, 66 yards, as you mentioned. Those stats are being buoyed by a 46-yard scamper. Take that away, he ran 4 times for 20 yards. Where Cohen benefits the most is the loss of Bears pass catchers like Cameron Meredith, like Kevin White, both of which are out for the remainder of the season. If your theory is true, Brian, that somebody has to catch the ball, I don't see the vast majority going to Zach Miller, Kendall Wright, Deontay Thompson. Tariq Cohen may end up leading Chicago in receiving categories in 2017. That doesn't hurt Howard, who will still be on the field for at least 95% of the offensive snaps week to week. He isn't known as a pass-catching back anyway. He'll probably be the guy scoring most of the touchdowns.
I did not use that theory of somebody has to catch the ball in Chicago.
Oh, really? So it doesn't apply to them?
Yeah, that was the exclusion to that rule.
I do think Tariq Cohen's probably the best pickup of the week. Many of you already taken advantage of that. Congratulations to, I believe I got him in our league, didn't I? Yeah,
I don't know.
I think I did. So
People are racking up Benjamins, man.
wow, come on. It'll just be
Money
$1 here,
flying
$1
off.
there. Before you know
Before
it,
you know it, you're
50
$100 down.
I know. And my team will not resemble what I just drafted. Anyway, more matchups still to come. This is 515 Fantasy Football. More matchups. Week number 2, 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. My next matchup, Miami at Los Angeles Chargers. Start with the Dolphins. Jay Cutler, a C grade. Too much risk for my liking in this matchup. Across country, for many of these Dolphins, Cutler included. Chargers have an excellent tandem of cover corners in Casey Hayward and Jason Verrett that held Denver pass catchers to a modest yardage total in week 1. Smoke and Jay prone to taking risks that often result in turnovers. So don't love Cutler this week. Ajayi, I give a B grade to because I think he'll see a ton of volume in a game that should be pretty closely contested. I don't hate his chances of turning in a decent fantasy day, including at least 1 touchdown opportunity up close. Devontae Parker, a B-, likely becomes Cutler's favorite downfield target this season, but gets a tough draw following the rare week 1 bye. Chargers secondary traditionally been very good against opposing receivers, allowing the 8th fewest touchdowns to the position in 2016, and a long reception of only 64 yards. Jarvis Landry, a C+, mainly a PPR play. Landry's a volume guy. He should probably only get consideration this week in the flex spot. Rarely hits pay dirt. I don't see that changing this year considering his quarterback and the matchup he's got in front of him here in week 2. Julius Thomas, a C grade, though I'm optimistic he'll outperform his ADP over the course of the season. I'm not betting on him against one of the league's toughest defenses against the tight end position. The Chargers were very good against them last year. And for the Chargers, Phillip Rivers, a B+. He's averaged roughly 27.5 fantasy points over his last 2 starts against Miami. The latest in November of last season where he threw for 326 yards and 3 touchdowns. Though in that game, he also threw 4 picks. I love that he's got Keenan Allen back in the mix, and that should help improve things as long as he can stay healthy. That's been a big if past couple of seasons for him. Melvin Gordon, a B grade, didn't score on the Dolphins last season, but he did finish with 132 combo yards, 70 on the ground, 62 through the air. Again, assuming this one is competitive, I expect a lot of Melvin Gordon. The volume alone makes him worthy of a start. Keenan Allen, B+. Like him a lot since his 2017 has gotten off to a running start. 10 targets in week 1 and a score gives him momentum. Tyrell Williams, a C grade with Allen in the lineup. Williams returns to his natural role in the Chargers. Targets a week, somewhere in that range. Isn't a huge threat to score week to week, but can get it done from time to time. This is against the tight end position in 2016, allowing nearly 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns to the position last season. Gates looks slow, but he may get one step closer in this contest.
All right, we're going to go to the 49ers at the Seattle Seahawks right along the ocean. Quarterback Brian Hoyer, bench, 193 yards, 0 touchdowns, worn a bench spot. Should be left there, especially traveling north into Seattle. Hostile territory. Running back Carlos Hyde's going to get a B-, 45 yards on 9 carries, so it's not bad from a yards per carry angle. I mean, if you want to be positive and look at that side, 6, not bad, great. But they're going to be playing from behind against a stacked box, so don't expect much out of Hyde this week. Pierre Garçon's going to get a C. 10 targets on 81 yards, same situation. He's going to see plenty of double teams, and you can start if you need to, but I would look elsewhere first. Marquise Goodwin, leave him on the bench, 21 yards. No reason to get excited. Applied Jets logic here. 58 yards. Passing isn't great, especially if you were a believer, which I was not, but the Niners are in play better if Wilson is going to get some good points on your fantasy roster. Running back, whoever, I don't know. I'm benching any Seattle running back right now.
Yeah, at this point, I think the better question is like, who's worthy of a roster spot in fantasy leagues at this point? I think Eddie Lacy you can easily drop at this point. If you haven't already, go ahead and drop Eddie Lacy. He's finished. He's Trent Richardson. We've seen it. We're done.
Yep.
The other one that I'm intrigued by is I'm intrigued by Thomas Rawls. I want to see what he can do if he's healthy, and he's going to get back in the lineup this week. So we'll get a good look at him and see where he's at. CJ Prosise only in PPR leagues.
Done.
Yeah, if you're in a standard, you're not even considering him. Chris Carson's the other guy.
Yep, with what Pete.
My thing is like, it's the great unknown because we don't know anything about him. He's going to be the most attractive, that awful offensive line.
Yeah.
I mean, if he can get it done, considering their offensive line is awful, one of the worst in the league. Chris Carson, I mean, he could be a guy worth rostering.
Yeah, I've been a Rawls believer, but, I mean, with all the stuff going on, I just stay away if you can. Wide receiver Doug Baldwin, he's going to get an A. Caught all 4 of his targets, 63 yards, but was scoreless. Expect this to increase and feel confident in your lineup with Doug Baldwin. Sorry. Wide receiver Paul Richardson, he's going to get a B. A tad scary here after the week 1 shakeup. I thought he was locked in, but then along comes Sunday, and bam, crikey. He had 7 targets, most on the team, and Lockett had 2. So while I was worried about Lockett kind of sneaking in there, no, what's going on? Nah, just kidding. Lockett only had 2. Now, hope you snagged him like we told you to, but Pete Carroll said he hopes to get Lockett more involved. Yeah, well, Pete Carroll wants everybody involved, and that's kind of the problem. So I'm still sticking with Richardson over Lockett right now.
Yeah, he's just a guy, Tyler Lockett.
Yep. And then you got the tight end, Jimmy Graham, doing his thing out there. So if you got him, start him.
I would. Yeah, I would absolutely start him. And George Kittle, for that matter. I mean, listen, he's dealing with a bit of a hamstring issue. He still played through it last week. And, for his first action in the NFL, I've never been a guy to, stick my neck out for rookie tight ends. And, for good reason most of the time. But, George Kittle's a guy throughout the course of the season. He'll continue to be a nice safety valve for Brian Hoyer. And from the look of it in week 1, Brian Hoyer needs that plus more. All right, on to Washington at the Los Angeles Rams. First, we'll start with the Redskins. Kirk Cousins, a B+. I'm buying that. There's no way they'll be nearly as dominant as they were in week 1 against perhaps the league's most success against a streaky Eagles defense last week. I think once he finds his rhythm in what should be a high-volume passing game. Part of the reason, a below-average running game. Last season, Rob Kelly is a below-average NFL running back. Advantage Rams. Chris Thompson, I'll give a C+ to. He has appeal only in full PPR leagues, and even Terrell Pryor, a B+. The Rams gave up the 9th fewest yards to opposing receivers in 2016, but a total of 32 touchdowns. 32. A matchup like this, perfect for Pryor, given the opportunity. Again, just a matter of rhythm with his new quarterback. I think that'll come along rather quickly. Jamison Crowder, I give a B grade to. In PPR, Crowder's a must-start. Best in that flex spot. In standard, he only has value if he hits pay dirt. As many receiving touchdowns as the Rams allowed in 2016, certainly possible. Jordan Reed, a C+. The Rams were tough on the tight end position last year, giving up the 4th fewest yards to the position. Reid has value in the red zone. Great Goff. We got to come up with something.
Goff's great.
There you go. The Skins were pretty beat, as we saw with Carson Wentz in week 1. Todd Gurley, I'll give a B grade to. Todd Gurley may be the next Trent Richardson-like bust. He could be.
Wow, man.
Huge disappointment despite big volume. It could be the offensive line, but it could be Todd Gurley. Nobody's pointing that out. I've heard fantasy expert after fantasy expert try to throw it at me that Todd Gurley's going to have a big bounce back this year.
Nope.
I wasn't buying it because I just don't buy the offensive line, and I don't think he's that special a talent now that defenses have sort of scouted him and figured him out. Here I am talking trash on Todd Gurley. I swear if he doesn't do it this week, he might, but if he doesn't, it's over. Sammy Watkins, a C+, likely to be shadowed whenever possible by Josh Norman, who held Alshon Jeffrey of the Eagles to 3 receptions for only 38 yards in week 1. Cooper Kupp is the better of the two this week for me. He gets a B+. Philly's number 2, Nelson Aguilar, finished with 6 catches, 86 yards, and a score. Kupp is clearly the Rams' second-best threat through the air, and considering they don't have a real go-to tight end, I like him, and I thought Goff looked really, really good last week. Yes, it was a terrible defense, obviously, to yield some positive results. I would put Kupp right up there in the pecking matchups we're going to talk about. In the last matchups segment is that Detroit-New York Giants game, and Brian has the honor of going through that matchup, plus Dallas-Denver as well. And I, of course, am going to talk the great Green Bay-Atlanta game. Oh, I just realized Detroit-New York Giants, the Monday night game. There you go.
Ooh, baby.
So we'll break down those matchups before getting to our final segment. This is 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday from 11 to 1 on 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines, Iowa, where Brian and I both happen to reside. We love this place. We are talking fantasy football. Yeah, ish. Okay. We're talking fantasy and 3 more matchups to go over. We're going to grade some more fantasy-relevant players. Brian, begin with you.
Dallas at Denver, quarterback Dak Prescott, he's going to get a B. Was there somebody who bet you last week that, oh, man, Dak's going to throw up 30 points?
Oh, somebody just started popping off about, we are so wrong on Dak Prescott. Listen, buddy. Ezekiel Elliott's in the backfield. Dak Prescott doesn't need to do a whole lot.
No, well, he didn't. So he had 268 and a score.
Yay.
All right, but I'm going to give him a B here. Denver, you know what? Yeah,
I don't know if I'd go B. That's pretty high.
Yeah, but I think he's got it in his legs, and he knows how to use them.
Yeah, okay.
Boom.
Like ZZ Top?
Yep, you betcha. I gave some good grades here. Denver, I don't know. I don't think the defense is going to be there.
You're saying that because I drafted them in your league.
Did I? Oh.
I did.
Running back Ezekiel Elliott. Hey, Zeke is Zeke no matter what. It doesn't matter who's on the other side. 150 combined yards. But I was surprised there wasn't a TD. He'll get one this week. You can bet on it.
Yeah, Denver wasn't a great run defense last year. It's all about the pass defense.
So wide receiver Dez Bryant, I'm going to give him a B. Dez may be getting grumpy, but he only caught 2 of his 9 targets.
Yeah, I don't like him at all this week. I think Aqib Talib is one of the best in the league, and I don't see Dez succeeding.
Dez is going to get angry. He's going to get angry. He's going to get mad. He's going to start yelling at Dak, and then Zeke's going to jump in and punch somebody.
Wow.
And then, here we go.
Bedlam.
Wide receiver Terrence Williams, you might as well just give him a C. Somewhat a surprise here. He caught 6 of his 7 targets, especially with Dez there.
Yeah, listen, you got Cole Beasley, you got Bryce Butler muddying up the mix.
Adjusted their plays book to maybe not have Zeke carry it 30 times because he carried it 25. So
I don't know.
So tight end Witten, whatever, I guess.
I know you say that, but Witten's still a viable fan.
More weeks before it happens again.
I don't think it will be.
On to the Broncos
and
side
I
of the
tend
ball.
to be right about Jason Witten when I make my claims.
You made one claim last year, and that was the year.
Yeah, I pretty much nailed it.
Quarterback Trevor Siemian, he's going to get a B+. Really surprised by his stat line. I typically look at the wide receivers before I look at the quarterback play. So I look at the receivers, I'm like, oh, my God, man, his line isn't going to be that good because I always look for Sanders and Thomas. And I'm like, oh, wow, he threw the ball to everybody else but those 2 guys. So that's pretty cool. So he had a good start against the Chargers. He's going to have an offensive pace to keep up with this week. C.J. Anderson, he's going to get a C, 4 yards per carry and a catch. Looks like the job is his as long as he's healthy and Jamal Charles keeps fumbling, who also had 10 touches and 4 yards per carry himself. So they're kind of tied there. Something to watch, but they both combined rushed for 30 times. So that was kind of cool too.
Yeah, I think Jamal Charles.
You can see when Charles got in there and he got the ball, like he was running hard and fast, like the old Jamal Charles. That was pretty cool. I like that. Demaryius Thomas is going to get a B. The 8 targets are great, but the 30 rushing attempts from the both running backs is a little bit more scary. It may be that game flow and playbook is dictating to a larger run than pass percentage. That's not good if you own Demaryius Thomas. Emmanuel Sanders is going to get a B-. Bad day. Let's hope he turns it around. Someone you targeted late because we told you to. I believe the bounce back is their second highest in targets. Just couldn't make much out of the ones he caught.
Yeah, don't overreact to week 1.
Nope. Benny Fowler, he's on the watch list. Had 4 targets, 2 touchdowns, so something awesome happening there. We'll monitor it, make sure that you don't pick him up too early, and then it wasn't a fluke.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd jump out and grab him this week. I want to see some more before I invest in Mr. Fowler.
Yeah, it hurts really bad, so now I want to go cry.
I could make my next matchup super simple. Just start everybody. Green Bay, Atlanta. The Packers side, Aaron Rodgers is an A. He's thrown for an average of 285 yards per game against the Falcons over the course of his career, tossing 4, 3, 2, 3, 1, 3 touchdowns in 6 meetings since 2008. Only 1 interception over that span. Some rushing yards thrown in for good measure. Ty Montgomery, a B+, adds a new dimension to the Packers offense that doesn't necessarily need to throw the ball inside the 5 now. He has a nose for the end zone. He can catch passes. A rare 3-down back that should be an every week starter. I love Ty Montgomery. I didn't think I'd be saying that in the preseason, but Ty Montgomery, man, he's quite the commodity. Jordy Nelson in an A grade. He torched the Falcons in his last 2 starts against them, catching 8 passes for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns in December of 2014. 4 catches, 94 yards in the score last October. Devonta Freeman as a red zone threat. He hasn't scored on Atlanta in 2 meetings against them, but did grab 12, and I'm going to leave on the bench. We haven't really seen exactly how he might fit into the offense yet. We do know he's an elite blocker, which likely keeps him in to help protect Rodgers more than sending him out on pass patterns. So that's the Packers. Over to the Falcons. Matt Ryan, a B+. Recent history has been kind to Ryan. He's averaged 32 fantasy points per game in his last 2 head-to-heads against Green Bay. In a game that should be among the highest scoring of Week 2, Ryan will need to keep his receiving core happy in order to keep pace. Devonta Freeman, a B grade. He scored twice in last season's meeting with Green Bay, but it was held to a total of only 58 combo yards, below average for him. They did a good job of keeping Seattle's stable of backs out of the end zone in Week 1 as well, so I'm not as thrilled about Freeman in this matchup as I would be most others. Pick up the slack. In 2016, there were no games that both backs, when healthy, went belly up, if both were great fantasy options. As far as the receivers go, Julio Jones, a B+. Who could forget 14? That was against the Packers. Stuff of legend, and thank God we have that, or else we'd be talking about we know what Jones is capable of any given Sunday, and that the coaching staff wants to target him more in the red zone. So look for that to happen here. Mohamed Sanu, a C+. I like him, but don't love him. Same with Taylor Gabriel. He gets a C grade, just kind of a dart throw to be sure. Dynamic playmaker, yes. I wouldn't risk rushing him into your lineup, but just know this guy has had some success against Green Bay. He's capable of scoring at any time from any part of the field. Austin Hooper also gets a C grade. Take away his 88-yard scamper for a score in Week 1, which, by the way, that stiff arm, he threw that dude like 5 yards down the field. Is great. A relatively slow day aside from that for Hooper. He created one hell of a nice play for the highlight reel, but in reality, he saw only 2 targets all day long. Go ahead and finish strong, Brian.
All right, let's do it. Matt Stafford, Lions at the Giants. Matt Stafford, A. Obvious A here, no doubt about it. Last 2 years, they've been operating under Jim Bob Cooter, and expect the same from Stafford's run last year until the broken finger. Nearly 300 yards, but it was against the Cardinals, and we weren't expecting it anyways. I would expect it this week. I am starting Abdullah in my leagues. You should too. Golden Tate, he's going to get the A. If anyone had questions about Tate's role in the slot, how well he was going to pan out, well, how does 10 catches and 107 yards sound for you? Must start every week, regardless of who the defense is. Wide receiver Marvin Jones Jr., he's going to get a B-. Targeted twice, likely due to coverage rather than gameplay, but he did get a touchdown, so that's okay. Definitely something to watch, though, with the young Mr. Galladay here. Talked about him in April. He's almost like a Marvin Jones Jr. clone, but a little bit better. So you know how that works out for me. Ebron, you know my fight, didn't look great at all. Paul Perkins, leave him on the bench until they get their offense figured out. Maybe he's going to roll it getting off a party yacht the day prior to the game. If he goes, he's an A. Really not the case. You have to wonder if Marshall went 1 year too long.
Yeah. I think the presence of OBJ actually helps a guy like Brandon Marshall.
Yeah, for sure. But
So-
Marshall he was at the end of his career 2 years ago.
It just depends.
I don't-
I'm not ready to write him off. I'm just not.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean,
I don't
you
wanna
gave him a B
overreact.
minus. You gave him a B minus. I would have said bench, but I get that there's at least some intrigue in the matchup. So there you have it. That's it for the matchups. We're done. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about bargain bins with the Listener League. We have a new sponsor on board, so we're excited to tell you about all that. Next, final segment, 515 Fantasy Football on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. Final segment of the Week 2 edition, 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. We'll start this segment with bargain bins, and the bargain bin segment sponsored by our friends at Twisted Vine Brewing Company, Westtown Parkway, West Des Moines, online at twistedvinebrewery.com. About 30 beers on tap, 25 of which are brewed on site. They've got wine as well, and I'm proud to announce that Twisted Vine Brewery is the place Brian and I will be hanging out on Sunday morning, starting at 10:30. Swing by, watch some football with us, and enjoy some delicious craft beers.
Cannot wait to get this thing going. It's kind of been in the works for a little while. Everything finally came together. Here's the deal. Here's my pitch to you friends out there. We talked about priority, being able to get in front of you, getting you the right reads. The way you guarantee yourself to get your questions answered, to get in front of us and get talking, is to be here at Twisted Vine Brewery. Get in front of us. Let's talk about it. Let's debate it. You might think one thing, I think other. You want to see me and Andy yell at each other? That's not going to take long.
That actually would be something some people might pay a cover charge for.
Yeah, so come down, check it out. Look, they've got lots of beer. They've got ales to lagers, Belgians to Americans. I mean, they got stuff going on everywhere. Plenty of pizza, plenty of popcorn. It's a great environment. If you've never been there, it's a great open environment. Plus, by the way, for us fantasy footballers, you don't have to watch anybody else's game. This is all Red Zone channel all the time.
I love that.
This is what we need as fantasy football people, is the Red Zone channel. So get your butts down there. We're going to be there at 10:30. You don't have to get there that early. But if you want to, come hang out with us. Come check it out. Let's do this together, friends. Let's help you win.
Bargain bins, 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 1 pass catcher.
Hold on, I'm not ready.
That's all right. I'll give you my quarterback first. Mine's Alex Smith. Incredibly, Week 1's Offensive Player of the Week in the AFC is only owned in 42% of Yahoo Fantasy leagues. Smith has always been seen as a game manager, but showed serious playmaking ability against a usually tough Patriots secondary. And with a solid O-line in front of him, an emerging superstar in running back Kareem Hunt behind him, a proven stud tight end Travis Kelce alongside of him, and an elite downfield threat in Ty Freak Hill flying past defenders, Smith is a guy that should not only be owned, he should be considered this week and against an injury-riddled Eagles secondary in what should be a relatively high-scoring affair.
I'm going to go to the opposite side of the ball. Quarterback Carson Wentz. He had a decent game, and he had a great second half, finished with 302 touchdowns. He seemed to have good efficiency and rapport with Aguilar and Ertz, but Alshon was silent. Worth the flyer if you have an open spot, because he could get on a roll, especially heading into just a high-scoring game here.
My running back is Buck Allen, with Danny Woodhead expected to miss 2 to 4 weeks or more of action with a sore hammy. Allen steps in as Baltimore's primary pass-catching back, and it could be argued a guy with far more potential in the carry department than the aging Terrence West, who looked pedestrian at best in Week 1. He's owned in only 41% of Yahoo leagues. The Ravens love throwing to their running backs, as you know. Buck easily benefits from Woodhead's absence. He saw more field time, more touches than West last week, and I think that'll continue as the Ravens face Cleveland at home in Week 2.
Running back Alvin Kamara, stash pick only here. He outsnapped Adrian Peterson. The what-ifs surrounding AP and the scowling and the headlines and all that stuff is something we need to monitor. Ingram is already not the favorite. That's why they brought in AP. It feels like New Orleans may be looking for the future already in the running back category.
Pass catcher is Charles Clay. Mentioned him earlier in the show. Owned in less than 20% of Yahoo Fantasy leagues. Clay clearly looks to be one of Tyrod Taylor's favorite targets. But that's not just in terms of his Week 1 success against the Jets. This goes back to late 2016 when Clay amassed 30 targets over his last 4 games, scoring 4 touchdowns. Oh, by the way, Carolina's defense ranked second to last against the tight end position last season, allowing a total of 12 touchdowns to the position. Charles Clay, count on it.
Wide receiver Austin Hooper, somebody you dogged on in your matchup.
Look at you talking about a tight end.
Yeah. So pretty sure I talked about him being a sneaky play long ago in our preseason shows. Running well in the open field, great yard after catch there, stiff arm, we talked about it. I mean, there's just lots of good stuff. I expect Matt Ryan to move him up the depth chart after last week.
All right, buddy. The 515 Fantasy Football Listener League is presented by Iowa Firecracken. Iowa-owned, Iowa-operated, America-approved. Find them online at firecracken.com, on Facebook, on Twitter, at iFirecracken. Come December 1, we hope that if you are in the market for beautiful things that go boom, that you'll buy from 3 local guys that love fantasy football almost as much as they love the business that they're in. Listener League Week 1, not very kind to either one of us. Credit goes to Steve's Annihilators, currently your clubhouse leader in the Ollie's Heat division. Highest score of the week beat me, 102.14 to 89.5. You lost to Taco Corp by a very slim margin, as we mentioned at the top, 66.38 to 65.74. That's got to be a kick to the nether regions. In other action, Quick Dumps division, leader Boomin. Way to go, Matty, over Oink. 99.62 to 56.98. Comb the Desert over Phillips Bullowtie, 96.08 to 83.74. Purple People Eaters over Petty and the Jets, 89.02 to 83.98. And Big Willie Style edges out Bell Cow Ricky, 88.44 to 87.32. This week I've got Petty and the Jets. You've got our buddy Matt Boomin. Steve's Annihilators face off against Comb the Desert. That should be a good matchup. Taco Corp taking on Bell Cow Ricky. Big Willie Style gets Oink, and Purple People Eaters do battle with Phillips Bolo Tie. That is the 515 Fantasy Football Listener League recap, courtesy of our friends at Iowa Firecracken. Again, sales begin again December 1st here in the state of Iowa.
First in line.
Iowa Firecracken has several locations, one of them locally here in central Iowa in Windsor Heights. So again, we hope when you choose to purchase beautiful things that go boom, you'll do it from 3 local dudes that love fantasy football as much as we do. Time for a little flea flicker. How about that?
Do you have something on top of your head?
Actually, I don't. I'm just wanting to reiterate that Brian and I are excited to be a part of Twisted Vine Brewery's Sundays.
Yeah, I'm digging it. I'm liking it. I think it's going to be fun. It's a good environment. It's just wide open. I mean, we were talking about this. There's an establishment that, they tend to cater to a certain game or two because of the loud guy that sits in the corner. Yeah. Then they blast it through the sound system, so you're trying to watch your game, but you can't hear anything, and you're hoping you can see it on the crappy TV. Well, Twisted Vine, we don't have that problem because it's going to be all red zone all the time for us fantasy football. They are catering to fantasy football, not this person want to watch this game. They're catering to fantasy football. Let's make it the hub of Central Iowa, folks. Let's get out there. Let's do it.
I mean, what would I be doing if I was here at home? I'd be watching the Red Zone channel.
Exactly.
But that is how I spend most of my Sundays.
It's watching the Red Zone channel.
Why not come out and enjoy some delicious craft brew as well? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I tried the Black Knight on Wednesday night. And it's black beer, but it's real hoppy, and it's an ale. It was delicious.
Yeah, me, I'm more of like a pale ale guy. I like IPAs. I like I don't like the dark beers so much. Not a fan of the texture on most of those.
This was completely different, though.
Was it?
You're going to have to try the Black Knight.
Oh, listen, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to try everything at Twisted Vine.
Yeah.
Everything. I'm very excited to do that, by the way. So we hope, again, if you're here locally and would like to come watch some football with Brian and I, you'll do that.
Also, 20% off for all veterans and first responders at Twisted Vine.
And you know what? Another reason to love these guys at Twisted Vine. I mean, Brian and I are both supporters. Brian's a former military himself, and
Well, it's the 20% that caught me off guard. Everyone's, oh, yeah, we do the 10%.
No, 20. That's awesome.
Hey, above and beyond 20%.
Yep.
Nailed it. Awesome.
Huge fan of that, no question. And, they're doing something they've never done before, which is open up at 10:30 a.m. on a Sunday.
Yeah,
so.
That's a great thing, too. They believed in what we do so much that they're opening about 4 hours early to get the day started.
God, I hope this week goes better. Last week was it was the worst week one I think I've ever had.
Anybody did. So that was my goal, is, well, how'd you do? I was injury-free and I won the majority of my leagues. I am happy.
Oh, you nailed it then. See me? Not so much. Like I said, I own David Johnson in several leagues, yours included.
Big blow.
Oh, man. I mean, the consensus number one overall pick goes
Gone.
down in week 1. When has that ever happened? I don't know if that's ever
Who
happened.
said the Lions can't do anything right?
Well, there's that, too. You actually have a pretty decent-looking squad there. I certainly picked against them in week 1. I thought the Cardinals were going to come out swinging.
No, that's a huge win for us.
And Kenny Golladay, man, I'm telling you, we've been singing his praises for a while
So there
now.
was a lot of stuff about that where people, well, he's playing from behind. They're throwing. No, I don't consider being behind. Oh, that's there we go. There's one. One thing was like, oh, they did a comeback Cats. They were down a score that's not coming back in the fourth quarter. They were
Right.
down a score. Stop it.
Right. It's a good squad, Brian, and I think the Vikings are off to a good start as far as my favorite squad goes. So, I mean, there's that too. We'll see what happens, what week 2 brings. Hopefully, good health for most of the fantasy commodities. Good Lord, we need that.
At least
no
mine
question.
anyways.
Well, come on now. Be kind. Rewind. Thank you so much for listening to this week's edition of the program. If you missed any part of the show, you can go back and listen on demand anytime. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, whatever you call it, we are there for you. For Brian Eikenberry, I'm Andy Hall. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio.